off this with one question for you. You said that in the deep sleep, there is no difference between the deep sleep of a rich man and a poor man. Does it mean that I don't have to go and buy my $1,500 sleep number bed now?
Absolutely. As long as you can get deep sleep. So, so if you ask people who have everything, right, and if they are not able to sleep in the night, what good is it? If you think about it, right? Why are we not able to sleep well in the night? Because our mind is disturbed. And why is the mind disturbed? There could be conflicts. That could be how we perceive things that life throws at you. Life is going to throw things at you, right? Life, as it was pointed out earlier, is not a bed of roses. Now here is if you treat life as a road, the road is going to have potholes. It's going to have bumps along the way. Now the question is, it's clear to us that we cannot change the road to make it smooth all around, right? That I think is very clear. But what we can do is to have a shock absorber in our car so that we can face these potholes and bumps along the way and navigate it very easily, right? And that's the point.
I like that analogy.
The shock absorber for ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that. There were also several questions, and maybe, I will request the people who were posting the questions in the chat to ask them. And maybe Vivek, I think you were the first one to post it. Do you want to ask a question?
Thank you very much. Lovely presentation there. So for me, that your statement or slide which said cessation or modification of the mind, that really resonated. And I wondered whether you would like to explain a little bit and share your thoughts on, within the 8 limbs of Patanjali Yoga, Pratyahara and Dharana as a way towards, and I'll give the context a little bit more in that, there's Sadhguru is a very sort of, you can say whatever you want about Sadhguru, but he said one good thing that I related to. Time essentially is the space between 2 events. And so if we stop having too many thoughts, then time sort of stops. And that is where I was trying to relate that to Pratyahara and Dharana. So please.
Yeah. So in meditation, if you have experienced this, as you go from your body, awareness of the body, to your sensory organs, your mind, your eyes are closed. There are no inputs coming in through the eyes. Your ears, you kind of observe, and let's say it's silent, nothing coming through that. And you kind of walk in slowly into the mind, which is actually doing the perceptions of the signals that are coming in through these sensory organs. And then you start to observe the mind. When we say observe as a third party, just like you observe the cars on the road, right? Or you're just a plain observer, or a tree by a river where there are travelers on the river and you are just the tree who's just observing everything. As you do this, you realize that one thing is that initially there are many thoughts, but then the act of observation stops the thoughts, which is a very strange phenomenon that you experience in meditation. Just the act of observing, plain observation, actually reduces and minimizes the thoughts. And as this strengthens, you reach a point where there are no thoughts, there is no thought of the body, and it is just blank, right? And many of us might experience this glimpse. You might see the glimpse of it here and there in meditation. But if you're able to keep that for a long period of time, the Yoga Sutras, they call it samadhi, or the highest level of the Ashtanga Yoga practice. But what it's essentially telling us is that you experience that blankness, and not to say that, hey, you have to go into a deep meditative state to experience happiness, but because once you experience that happiness and peace, it validates everything that you're learning outside of it, right? So you want to carry that forward in everything you do in life, right? So you are, it's like this, it's a proof eventually that, hey, I've read about this and now I've seen it. Now it's within me. That knowledge is within me, right? So it gives us that opportunity to gain that knowledge through meditation. It is not to say that meditation is the only way to get there. Meditation provides the proof for yourself. So we assimilate that knowledge, right?
Gunz, you had a question. Okay, he's not there. Okay, let me, Kishore, another question. We're going to have maybe 2 more questions, and I know it's getting pretty late, but there's a question from Gunz. He says that if Satyam is below the value of Ahimsa, is there a gradation of all the values as Dharma, or is everything context-based? And what is the point at which we know our mental impurities are cleared?
Okay, I think there are 2 different questions there, right? So I think the first one, yes, from what Gunz is trying to get in here. Yeah, from what I understand, again, is that there is a gradation, Ahimsa being at the top, right? And I'm not sure if everything is laid out that way, or if it's just 1 or 2, like Ahimsa is at the top and everything else is at the same. I don't believe there's a hierarchy, if you will, but it's, you know, for a reason, the Ahimsa is specified as the number 1, the first yama in the yamas and niyamas. So there is a gradation. And we are often faced with this because we are at crossroads. There is a conflict of values between one or the other. Should I, you know, there's a value for money versus value for truth. If I say something, so value for money would be a personal value, but it violates a universal value. So which should I take? I think the universal value wins, right? So even within that, there is a gradation. Right. And the second part is about impurities. I think the way to measure that would be that FIR framework, which is, you know, can we see if those impurities show up in different ways? It shows up as greed, it shows up as anger, it shows up as jealousy, it shows up as the 2KLM3, right? As we have spoken about. And one way is to measure ourselves against that by seeing, does it show up? How often does it show up? Previously, it used to show up 8 out of 10 times. Now it's 5 out of 10 times. You're making progress.
Great, thank you, thank you. Just opening this up for other people to ask questions. We probably will take maximum 3 more questions because we really overshot our time. So I apologize for that.
And
so
I apologize for that.
3 more questions. Anyone can unmute themselves and ask. Okay.
Oh, Kishore.
Mahesh, you're on mute. You're talking, but you're on mute.
Oh, okay. There was a question from Mahesh. Okay, Mahesh.
Yeah. Kishore, there's a question for you. In Patanjali Yoga Sutra, you said there's a cessation of thoughts is what is happiness is. And in Bhagavad Gita slide, you showed the equipoise in, I mean, good and bad or like and dislike. Now, in equipoise, being equipoise, isn't it a thought?
See, equipoise, from what my understanding is actually, it's not a separate thought from the joy and sorrow, right? Or the treating both sukhas and dukkha as the same. You develop that as an attitude. You develop this as an attitude, so you can treat both in the same way. So that eventually leads to the samatvam or the equipoise, right? And in the first one, which is the calmness, they both point at the same thing. That was the point I wanted to bring up, which is that one of them says, you know, when the mind ceases to exist, right? When there are no thoughts, like in deep sleep, you encounter complete bliss, and we experience this on a daily basis, in fact. On the other side, it says, when you treat both success and failure, sukhas and dukkha as the same, you get to that same state through calm. You develop that calmness, right? So it's pointing to the same thing, was the Uber point I was trying to get there.
Yeah. VP, I think you had a question.
Yeah. So Kishore, I just great presentation. And I think one of the questions that comes to mind is why is it people find it difficult to practice karma yoga? I mean, what, in your opinion, you have given a wonderful framework, but why don't people, what are the difficulties they find?
Yeah. Again, that's why great question, VP. So this is why I think the imbibing that those values is equally important, right? Because what prevents us from, we all know this, right? We all know that we want to do this right thing and we want to do things for the greater good. We have that inbuilt in us, right? We are kind of born with it, right? Some of these universal values are there in us already, but we still don't do it, right? Like we know that we want to get up at 5 a.m. and we have to meditate and we should avoid certain foods or eat certain other things, but we often don't. So what prevents us from doing that, right? There is something inside us that's obviously taken over. I think like in a previous presentation that Rajesh pointed out, our mind says something, our intellect says something else, right? So how does our mind tell us anything? It's through thoughts. And those thoughts are coming through the impurities that are in us. So the imbibing the values reduces or neutralizes the impurities, which lets the intellect function at a higher level. Because the intellect is not clouded by the thoughts that are in the mind, but instead the intellect is able to shine through when the impurities settle down. And now you're driven off of that buddhi or the intellect more than the emotions that are happening at every time, right? So that slows down and the intellect shines through.
Yeah. And Kishore, just to add to what you're saying, I think VP, one of the other thing is we make a fundamental mistake, most of us, because we think that we are in control of everything. Okay. Unfortunately, that's not true. We are in control of only what we can do within our own, abilities. What is going to come out of it is not in our control. And unfortunately, we don't recognize that. That's a fault in our judgment, in the way that we view the world. And that makes karma yoga difficult for people to practice.
I have one question.
Thank you.
I have one question. Can
Please
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So you summarized very well, why we run after happiness and the problems we face, and what is the roadmap to follow to avoid those unhappiness, and so that we remain happy. Now, the question is, these are all methods for self-improvement. We try to, like what we have done or what we're doing in this group, that trying to internalize some of these learnings so that we improve ourselves. But most often what we face, at least at the workplace here, that we face problem with others. Other people lying, other people not being honest, other people doing wrong things. And that kind of affects our work path and leads us to suffer. And in the process, you also get influence to work in a way similar or go in the wrong path to achieve whatever the work goals or results are.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I
Yeah. No, if
these are self-improvements, but how what I'm trying to say is how can you use how can you use them to impact others?
Right. No,
Or even if you try to impact them others, like I feel it's a very long driven process, it's a very time consuming and a long driven process. Even if you try to impact any small element of all these learnings to others, it's very easy to change yourself. That's all you can do actually.
Right.
But most of the time the problem is with others and their work style, their behavior impacts you, and you end up suffering.
Right. So as we, very good question, very relevant, right? So as we pointed out, we cannot change others, as you yourself pointed out, right? We cannot change what road we are on. It will have potholes, it will have anything and everything. The best thing we can do is to get ourselves a shock absorber, right? So in this particular case, though, anything, if others are giving us trouble, it depends on how we perceive that. It finally comes down to how we perceive what others have said, what others are doing, and so on. It's not like we should not respond to that. All we are saying is, when we perceive it in that particular way, it need not affect us personally, right? Can we, from that state, from that centered state, where it has not emotionally kind of moved us, created an upheaval in us, can we, from that centered state, respond in the most appropriate way to that person or the situation, right? So that is the point. Can we develop that? Can we develop that shock absorber in ourselves? Because we cannot control everything that's around us.
Thank you, Kishore. Rajiv, yours is the last question, and then we will have to close this session. I know it's been a great saying and a lot of questions and a lot of follow-on questions, I'm pretty sure, but I'm sorry, we're really running short of time.
Sure, I think Alpana has already answered it partially in the chat. See, my basic question is that we say that, we should not get affected by sukha dukha or whatever, because of events, people not meeting our desires. And then if you're able to do that, then you experience a lot of happiness. Now, what is the technical term in scriptures? Is it that Satchit Anand Wala Anand, or is it something else?
Yes, Rajiv. This is the Ananda in Satchit Ananda, right? So that's why it's very hard to use this word happiness.
Frankly, exactly.
Right? Because we look at happiness so best way is to think of it as the lower grade happiness and a higher grade of happiness. The lower grade is what we experience on a day-to-day basis, and we call that happiness, which is derived from people, places, things, situations, and all that. But then the highest grade of happiness is what the scriptures point out as ananda, or roughly translated as bliss or happiness, that's coming from inside us. A very minuscule part of that is what we experience when we achieve and acquire things and so on.
Right. And the experience of that is different from sukh, right? Is it different from sukha?
That sukh is the lower grade of happiness.
And you get, right. And you get it sometimes when you're in the flow. I mean, that's
correct. And again, look at flow. If you look at flow, what has happened in a flow? Let's say you are an artist and you are singing and you are in the crescendo. You're not thinking about anything else. You are completely focused. Your mind does not have any other thoughts at this point. It's focused on one thing. There's one thought, which is of singing. And at that point, you experience that happiness and you come back and say, I was in a flow, right?
Right.
So that is an example, again, of the fact that when the mind settles down, you experience it.
All right.
Sure. Thank you, Kishore. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. I think it was great talk. Thank you, Kishore, and thanks for the great questions. On the question of, Ananda, I just want to conclude this thing by talking about this. In Taittiriya Upanishad, it actually talks about this. When you look at an object and when you acquire that object, when you experience that object, these are three different gradations of happiness. And these are all the ones which are coming from the objects that we experience or situations of people. Priya, Moda, Pramoda. There's the three categories of happiness, and the gradations are higher. Beyond that is Ananda, which is irrespective of the objects what you have, you experience that bliss. Okay, that's not happiness as in the English word happiness. That's bliss that we talk about. So definitely, we should, and that's independent of the objects. And what in the whole spiritual pursuit, what we're trying to say is that we don't need any objects, people, or situations to experience that bliss, because that's our very nature. So with that, I think, I'll have to thank everyone, and thank you, Kishore and VP, for excellent presentations today. And thanks everyone for great questions. I'm really, really sorry we overshoot the time, but next week, I think we'll start a little bit early, maybe 6:05. Instead of 10 minutes early, we'll start early, and we will hope to complete in time. With that, thank you so much, everyone. enjoy a wonderful day, and we'll just say Om Shanti thrice and we'll close today.
Thank you.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. Hari Om, everyone.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.